if you close your eyes.
Hello and welcome to Mr. Stroud's Psychology and Sociology Surgery. Today is a psychology one. Okay, so we're going to start, as always, with Psychology Fact of the Week. The Psychology Fact of the Week this week is that multitasking is actually a myth. Yeah, multitasking doesn't happen. You actually focus on one thing after another. So when you're revising, watching the TV, playing on your phone, looking at Facebook, you're not multitasking. Essentially, you're doing one at a time.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again. Hello.
Alright, today's video is about two things. IB, if you do the IB, the first section is about how to structure an essay question, okay? And the second part is for IB and A-level. It's about neurotransmission. Someone emailed me to ask about neurotransmission because they're finding it a little bit confusing. Absolutely fine. I'm going to try and simplify it a little bit, but obviously in your exam you should be writing lots of the key words, okay? So if you need to, talk to myself or other sociology or psychology teachers and they'll help you out, okay? But we're going to have a little look at something that was created by a company called Mind. Essentially, that will really help you to understand it. It's in an animation form. I'm also going to put it in the description, okay, the link to that animation so that you can have a look at your own and go for that, okay? Right, let's start with IB, shall we? Okay, so you've just been given your paper. All right, you're sitting down, very nervous. What's it going to be? Here is an abnormal psychology trio of questions here. Okay, now I'm going to focus on the first one. First thing you need to do in a question like this is to look at the command term. Now the command term here is evaluate. Now I gave you a handout for command terms in IB. If you've lost it, come and find me and I can give you another one. Essentially this will tell you all of the different examples, okay, and all the words it could start with and what you should put in, okay. Now let's go to evaluate, and it says make an appraisal by weighing up the strengths and limitations of something. All right, assess the value of something, e.g. a theory or study, by looking into the evidence. Explain the strengths and the limitations of the study and theory. And here's an example, evaluate one social cultural explanation of violence. Now this one you don't need to worry about because you aren't doing that subject, okay? But we're focusing on abnormality. So, evaluate the use of eclectic approaches to treatment. Now remember, the approaches that we have are the drug-based ones. If we're talking about depression, let's do it with depression, okay? So you've got drug-based approaches. You've also got CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and you've got MBSR. Okay, you have 10 seconds to think of some psychology studies that we've looked at into the eclectic approaches, okay? Now this could be drug-based, CBD-based, etc. Right, have a think about some of the studies and they'll help you out. Go. Okay, so basically what we mean by eclectic approaches is using different treatments together to treat one patient. Essentially it's triangulation, using different treatments, for example drugs and CBT together. Now you could have said Riggs et al. In 2007, you could have said Neal et al. 2011, Klerman you could have talked about, and also Pampelona. Now if you don't remember these, revise, but then come and see me and I will give you the PowerPoint with those studies. Essentially this question is about evaluation. Alright, you need to start with a nice easy introduction about what eclectic approaches mean. Alright, as soon as you've done that you can then go on to the different studies and essentially what they found. Now, because it says evaluate again, what we're talking about is strengths and weaknesses for each study. So essentially, your plan of the question will look like this. Right, let's have a look then at neurotransmission. Now, IB need to know this, also A-level, okay, because it could come up in both exams. I'm going to show you on the screen essentially an animation that was created by the Mind Project, and they're going to sort of show you essentially how it works. I'll be talking through it as well. All right, enjoy. Okay, so let's talk about neurotransmission, shall we? Okay, we have all of these neurons. Let's focus on this neuron here. Over here, you've got the main body of the neuron, but then you've got the axon, and at the end, the axon terminal. Now, it connects to a dendrite from another neuron, okay? And essentially, you get the presynaptic neuron and the postsynaptic neuron. The only difference between the two is essentially the presynaptic neuron is where the electric message is coming from, the action potential is coming from, and the postsynaptic neuron is what's receiving that action potential, the electric signal. Okay, so for example, you see a dog running at you, you want to jump out of the way. The first neuron, the presynaptic neuron, is going to send an electric signal to the end, right? So the way that they communicate with each other is chemical. You see here right in the middle there's something called a chemical synapse, and this chemical synapse is a tiny gap between the neuron at the top and the neuron at the bottom. No neuron ever touches with another neuron. Okay, there's a reason for this, and we'll go on to it in a minute. So when this signal comes down, there you go, see the yellow signal? It's got to the end. Now this action potential, this signal, can't go any further. Okay, think of it as a wall. It gets stuck at the end. So instead of trying to push this electric signal through this gap, what it does is it allows neurotransmitters to do it for it. Okay, so what happens is you've got ions in the gap. Now ions essentially can be charged for the electric signals. Okay, so these ions are like little tiny mini batteries. When the signal goes in, okay, it would charge the ions and go through. Now, in order to get these ions to the next neuron, okay, there's some ion channels. Now, I like to think of ion channels as bouncers at the door of a pub. Okay, so these bouncers, they're not going to let any old person in. Okay, they're going to need a signal to let them know that these ions are allowed to go through. Okay, and these signals come in the form of neurotransmitters. Now, can you see this little pink dot opens up the gap, lets the ions through, and that releases the signal. All right, I'll show you that one again. So these little pink neurotransmitters, boom, opens up, lets the ions through. Now, these gates, there are loads of them, and there are loads of different ones. Okay, so chemical neurotransmitters fit into only a few gates. Okay, it's the lock and key sort of thing. So the key is the neurotransmitter will only open up certain ion channels. It depends what the signal's about. Okay, there's loads of different neurotransmitters, but that's for another video. Now, how do these neurotransmitters get into here in the first place? Well, when the action potential happens, okay, it turns on essentially these vesicles, and these vesicles are bubbles essentially of neurotransmitters. Now, I'll show you that again. What happens is the vesicle goes to the cell wall, merges with the cell wall, and allows those lovely neurotransmitters to enter into that synaptic gap. Okay. Now, these vesicles don't just release for fun; they release because of that electric signal that has just been allowed, that action potential that has just let them through. Okay. And as we've said before, these little pink channels will allow for the ions to go through. Now, what happens after that's all done is they actually go back into the neuron and go back into the vessels, almost like recycling. Okay, and this is through transporters, and it's called reuptake. They reuptake the information. Okay, now Mitochondria are the parts that actually create the vesicles. Okay, you don't need to know so much about them, but what you do need to know is that when this signal comes through, as we can see here, the signal comes through, releases the vesicles, the neurotransmitters then go into the gap here, synaptic gap. They then open the ion channels, let the ions through, and that sends the signal to the next. So neurotransmitters, those little pink things, come in two forms. You've got excitatory neurotransmitters and you've got inhibitory neurotransmitters. I'm going to put it right here so it's easier for you to write it down because I can't say it very well. Very sorry. Okay, now an excitatory neurotransmitter, when it binds to the ion channels, those receptors, it allows the signals to go through. Okay, whereas in an inhibitory receptor, essentially it doesn't allow the signal to go through. Now what will be fired depends on what chemicals are being released.
But if you close your eyes.
Right, competition time. So, this one will be for both IB and A level. Remember when we talked about reliability, and we said that reliability is the idea that if you did a study again, you could repeat it and get the same results. So, the competition this week is to essentially give me a step-by-step guide on how you would bake a cake. It has to be so specific that I can't go wrong, and I'm a terrible cook, okay? So it has to be so specific that even I could get it right. This is going to increase your skill in reliability and your procedure, because essentially you have to really focus on each point and what you should include, okay? So, detailed design procedure about how to bake a cake. Go.
But if you close your eyes.
Right, meme of the week was given in by Kira. Thank you very much, Kira. And it's about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Enjoy it, and I'll see you next week.